Have you ever woken up in the morning feeling like your body betrayed you? What if I told you that something many of us do every single day, believing it's healthy, could quietly stress your metabolism, disrupt your hormones, and over time contribute to severe outcomes that no one wants to face? Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your metabolic health isn't just about calories in and calories out. It's about how your liver processes fuel, how your pancreas manages insulin, how your nervous system regulates stress hormones like cortisol, and how your heart and arteries respond to that internal environment. When one system is out of balance, it pulls the rest off center. In this video, we're going to unpack a root cause that most people miss, a daily habit that seems harmless, even health-minded, but that pushes key physiological systems into a state of strain. And yes, research shows that sustained metabolic stress increases risk factors linked to cardiovascular strain, arrhythmias, and sudden events you never want to experience. I'll translate the science into simple terms, with analogies that help you see what's happening, not just hear about it. You'll learn 6 science-backed insights, including how fuel timing affects insulin sensitivity, the role of nocturnal stress hormones, and simple interventions that support liver function, stabilize energy, and protect your heart. This isn't fear-mongering. It's about understanding why the body behaves the way it does, so you can make choices that optimize health, energy, and longevity. If this is helpful so far, consider subscribing. I post content like this every day. Before we go deep, let me give you a clear roadmap of what we're going to cover. Think of this as the outline on the whiteboard before we connect the dots. Today, we're going to break down 6 science-backed insights behind why this common habit can increase the risk of sudden cardiac stress, especially in the early morning hours when your body is biologically most vulnerable. Here's what we'll unpack: the morning cortisol surge, why your stress hormone naturally spikes between 4 to 8 a.m., and how certain behaviors amplify that surge in a dangerous way. Blood sugar instability overnight, how poor evening habits disrupt insulin and glucose regulation, increasing sympathetic nervous system activation. Electrolyte imbalance and cardiac rhythm, the hidden role of magnesium, potassium, and sodium balance in preventing arrhythmias. Dehydration and blood viscosity, why your blood is naturally thicker in the morning, and how certain choices make it worse. Sleep disruption and oxygen stress, how late-night metabolic strain increases nighttime inflammation and cardiac workload. The fix: simple protective protocols, practical, evidence-based tools to stabilize metabolism, calm stress hormones, protect your heart, and lower long-term risk. Here's the key idea I want you to keep in mind. Sudden events rarely happen suddenly. They are usually the end result of silent, accumulated metabolic stress. In the next section, we'll start with the most misunderstood factor, the early morning cortisol spike, and why what you do the night before directly determines how your heart handles it. Most people think the morning is the safest time of day, but physiologically, it's actually one of the most vulnerable windows for your heart. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Between about 4 a.m. and 8 a.m., your brain triggers something called the cortisol awakening response. Cortisol rises sharply to wake you up. At the same time, adrenaline increases, blood pressure climbs, your heart rate accelerates, platelets become more adhesive, blood becomes slightly more concentrated. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your cardiovascular system as a highway. During sleep, traffic is light, but in the early morning, it's rush hour. Hormones press the gas pedal. Blood pressure increases. The heart pumps harder. Now here's the problem. If your arteries are already inflamed, if your blood sugar has been unstable overnight, if you're slightly dehydrated, if your electrolytes are low, that morning hormonal surge becomes a stress test. Research consistently shows that heart attacks, strokes, and fatal arrhythmias occur more frequently in the early morning hours, not because morning is dangerous, but because biology is amplifying underlying instability. So what makes this worse? One very common mistake: creating a metabolic storm the night before. Late heavy meals, alcohol before bed, high sugar desserts, severe sleep deprivation, even intense emotional stress without recovery. All of these elevate nighttime insulin and cortisol patterns. They impair deep sleep. They increase sympathetic nervous system tone. Instead of your body repairing overnight, it's firefighting. So when that natural morning cortisol surge hits, it's hitting an already stressed system. This is why someone can go to bed fine and experience a catastrophic event in the early hours. It's not random, it's cumulative physiology. Now let's shift to solutions. First, Finish your last meal at least 3 hours before sleep. This allows insulin to come down and growth hormone repair to rise. Second, prioritize magnesium-rich foods or consider 200 to 400 milliliters magnesium glycinate in the evening to stabilize cardiac rhythm and support parasympathetic tone. Third, hydrate earlier in the day, not right before bed, to support plasma volume without disrupting sleep. And fourth, protect deep sleep like it's medicine, because it is. Now let's talk about something that almost nobody feels happening, but it may be one of the most important drivers of early morning cardiac stress: unstable blood sugar during the night. Here's what's really going on inside your body. When you eat a high carbohydrate meal late in the evening, especially refined starches or sugar, your blood glucose rises. Insulin rises to push that glucose into cells. That's normal. But if the meal is large, late, or combined with alcohol, your insulin can overshoot. Several hours later, often between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., your blood sugar may dip too low. Your brain does not tolerate low glucose well, so it pulls an emergency lever. It releases adrenaline. It releases cortisol. It activates the sympathetic nervous system. In other words, your body enters a subtle fight or flight response while you're asleep. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your blood sugar as the fuel level in your car overnight. If the tank drops too low, an alarm goes off. That alarm is adrenaline. It raises your heart rate. It tightens blood vessels. It increases blood pressure, all while you're unconscious. You may not fully wake up, but your cardiovascular system feels it. This is one reason people wake at 3 a.m. anxious, with a pounding heart, or drenched in sweat. It's often not just stress. It's metabolic instability. What the research shows is that glucose variability, not just high glucose, increases oxidative stress and vascular inflammation. Over time, repeated nocturnal spikes in stress hormones strain the heart and arteries. Now let's make this practical. First, build a metabolically stable dinner. Prioritize protein, 30-40 grams, fiber-rich vegetables, and healthy fats. Reduce refined carbohydrates at night. This stabilizes glucose release. Second, consider a short post-dinner walk, even 10 minutes. Muscle contraction acts like a sponge for glucose, lowering the insulin burden. Third, if you are prone to nighttime waking, experiment with a small protein-based snack before bed, such as Greek yogurt or a few nuts, rather than sugar. This can prevent reactive hypoglycemia in some individuals. And fourth, if you have insulin resistance, prediabetes, or metabolic syndrome, addressing that root cause is not optional. Improving insulin sensitivity through strength training, time-restricted eating, and adequate sleep dramatically reduces nocturnal stress activation. Sudden cardiac events rarely start at sunrise. They often start at dinner. In the next section, we'll uncover another silent factor, electrolyte imbalance, and why even mild deficiencies in magnesium or potassium can destabilize heart rhythm in the early morning hours. Now let's go deeper into something that is rarely discussed, yet absolutely fundamental: electrolyte balance and cardiac rhythm stability. Your heart is not just a pump, it is an electrical organ. Every single heartbeat is triggered by a carefully orchestrated movement of minerals, primarily sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium, across cell membranes. These minerals create electrical gradients that tell your heart when to contract and when to relax. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Overnight, you naturally lose water through breathing and mild perspiration. If you're slightly dehydrated, if you consumed alcohol, if you ate processed foods high in sodium but low in potassium, or if your magnesium stores are low, that delicate electrical balance becomes unstable. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your heart like a symphony orchestra. Sodium and potassium are the violin and cello. They create the rhythm. Magnesium is the conductor. Without the conductor, the timing becomes erratic. Low magnesium doesn't always cause dramatic symptoms, but it increases excitability of cardiac tissue. It makes abnormal rhythms more likely, especially during the early morning cortisol surge we discussed earlier. Research has shown that suboptimal magnesium levels are associated with higher risk of arrhythmias and cardiovascular mortality. And here's the key: many people are functionally deficient even if their blood tests appear normal, because most magnesium is stored inside cells, not in serum. Potassium is equally important. Diets low in leafy greens, beans, and whole foods often fail to provide adequate potassium, while processed foods skew the sodium to potassium ratio in the wrong direction. That imbalance increases blood pressure and vascular cardiovascular stiffness. So what can you do? First, prioritize potassium-rich whole foods: spinach, avocado, salmon, lentils, squash. Aim for real food before supplements unless medically advised. Second, magnesium glycinate or magnesium taurate in the evening, typically 200-400 mg, may support parasympathetic tone and rhythm stability. Third, reduce ultra-processed foods. They distort mineral balance and increase inflammation simultaneously. Fourth, hydrate intelligently. A glass of water upon waking, not excessive, just steady, helps normalize plasma volume after overnight fluid loss. This isn't about fear, it's about understanding that your heart runs on minerals. And when those minerals are depleted in a metabolically stressed system, the early morning hours become less forgiving. In the next section, we'll look at dehydration and blood viscosity, and why thicker blood in the morning can increase cardiovascular strain more than most people realize. Now let's talk about something deceptively simple, but physiologically powerful: dehydration and morning blood thickness. Here's what's really going on inside your body. While you sleep, you go 6 to 8 hours without fluid intake. You lose water through respiration and minor perspiration. By morning, plasma volume is slightly reduced. Your blood becomes more concentrated, meaning it's thicker. Now, in a healthy system, this shift is manageable. But if you went to bed mildly dehydrated, if you consumed alcohol, if you ate a high-sodium processed meal, if you have elevated blood sugar, that morning concentration effect becomes amplified. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your bloodstream as a river. When water levels are high, the river flows smoothly. When water levels drop, the river becomes sluggish. Debris is more likely to collide. Friction increases. Thicker blood increases vascular resistance. The heart must generate more pressure to circulate it. Platelets, which are already more adhesive in the early morning due to circadian rhythm, are more likely to aggregate in a pro-inflammatory environment. What the research shows is that hemoconcentration, even mild, can increase cardiovascular strain. Combine that with elevated morning cortisol and blood pressure, and you've created a physiological environment where underlying plaque instability or rhythm vulnerability is more likely to express itself. Again, the event looks sudden. The physiology is not. So, what do we do? First, hydrate strategically during the day. Aim for steady intake rather than large late-night consumption that disrupts sleep. Second, limit alcohol, especially in the evening. Alcohol acts as a diuretic, worsening overnight fluid loss and disturbing electrolyte balance. Third, consider adding mineral support to your hydration, not sugary sports drinks, but simple electrolyte balance from whole foods or clean mineral blends if appropriate. Fourth, upon waking, drink 1 glass of water before caffeine. Coffee is fine, but caffeine is mildly diuretic. Replenish first. And if you wake with a dry mouth, rapid heart rate, or dizziness upon standing, that may be a clue that overnight fluid and electrolyte regulation needs attention. In the next section, we'll examine sleep quality and oxygen stress, and why fragmented sleep quietly increases inflammation, arrhythmia risk, and metabolic dysfunction long before symptoms appear. Now we arrive at one of the most underestimated drivers of early morning cardiac events: poor sleep quality and nighttime oxygen stress. Most people think sleep is passive. It's not. Sleep is when your nervous system shifts into parasympathetic repair mode. Blood pressure drops, heart rate slows, inflammation decreases, growth hormone rises, the brain detoxifies, the heart rests. But when sleep is fragmented, or when oxygen levels repeatedly dip during the night, that restoration never fully happens. Here's what's really going on inside your body. If you snore heavily, if you wake gasping, if you feel exhausted despite 7 to 8 hours in bed, if you carry excess visceral fat, you may be experiencing intermittent drops in oxygen saturation, even without realizing it. Each drop triggers a stress response. Adrenaline rises, blood pressure spikes, heart rhythm becomes more unstable, inflammatory cytokines increase. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine bending a paperclip once, nothing happens, but bend it back and forth hundreds of times overnight, eventually it weakens. That's what repeated oxygen dips and sympathetic surges do to the cardiovascular system. What the research shows is that sleep apnea and fragmented sleep are strongly associated with hypertension, arrhythmias, insulin resistance, and increased cardiovascular mortality. And importantly, many people are undiagnosed. Now let's connect the dots. If you combine unstable blood sugar, electrolyte imbalance, mild dehydration, and poor oxygenation, You create a perfect storm during the early morning hormonal surge. Again, the event may look sudden, but the physiology was building quietly for years. So, what are the protective steps? First, protect deep sleep like medicine. Dark room, cool temperature, no screens 60-90 minutes before bed. Second, stop eating at least 3 hours before sleep to reduce reflux and improve breathing mechanics. Third, if you snore loudly or feel unrefreshed, consider a sleep study. Treating sleep apnea dramatically reduces cardiovascular risk. Fourth, reduce visceral fat. Even a 5–10% reduction in body weight improves airway stability and insulin sensitivity. And fifth, strength training 2 to 3 times per week improves glucose disposal and reduces nighttime sympathetic activation. Now let's bring this together and make it practical, because information without action does not change physiology. Here's what we've uncovered. The early morning hours are a biologically vulnerable window. Cortisol rises, blood pressure climbs, platelets become more adhesive, your heart works harder. That alone is not dangerous. What makes it dangerous is metabolic instability underneath it. Unstable blood sugar, electrolyte depletion, dehydration, fragmented sleep, chronic inflammation, excess visceral fat. Sudden death is rarely a lightning strike. It is often the final expression of accumulated metabolic stress. So here is your simple protective protocol: clear, actionable, and sustainable. Finish dinner at least 3 hours before bed. Center it around protein, fiber, and healthy fats. Reduce refined carbohydrates at night. Walk for 10 minutes after dinner. Magnesium in the evening if appropriate. 200–400 ml glycinate or taurate. Hydrate consistently during the day. 1 glass of water upon waking before caffeine. Protect sleep. Dark room, cool temperature, no screens late. Strength train 2 to 3 times per week to improve insulin sensitivity and stabilize glucose overnight. And if you snore heavily, wake exhausted, or have risk factors like high blood pressure or insulin resistance, don't ignore it. Get evaluated. You don't need extreme interventions. You need metabolic stability. Try just one of these changes tonight. Observe your sleep. Notice your morning energy. Track how your body responds. Small adjustments compound. Your heart is not just a pump. It's a reflection of your metabolic environment. If this added value, like the video and subscribe to join others who are optimizing their health naturally without waiting for symptoms to appear. Your biology responds to what you do daily. Make tonight count.